So just now I've been listening with these IMs that I picked up at CanJam Singapore. See, Ahmed from Elise Audio cornered me and said, oh, you really got to check out these IMs from YU9 Audio. And they're called the QUE, or QUE. And they are a $399 resin printed pair of dynamic driver plus balanced armature or hybrid IMs. Basic old school hybrid IMs. But some of their customers, if you look on the Elise Audio site, have been really ecstatic about them, someone even saying that they're S tier. I wouldn't go quite that far, but I've been listening with them, and yeah, they are still pretty impressive. Now, they've got, at the moment, they've got not the stock tips on there, they've got Pentacon tips on there, but I'll talk about tip rolling a bit later. They are, as I said, appear to be resin 3D printed. I guess that they can make them less expensive than you'd normally get a pair of IMs like this, because they're not paying some company to make, a few thousand metal shells or whatever, but doing them kind of in their own 3D printer. Now, you might already see there the tip of the balanced armature sticking out of the nozzle there. And they come, actually, let me show you what they come with. So they come in this case, which is what Ahmed handed me, thus. And inside that you have some fairly stock things. You have a little pouch for them, and you have some soft silicone tips, and which the mediums have already elsewhere, I'll show you in a bit. Cleaning cloth, which I'm not sure you really need a cleaning cloth with resin IMs, but whatever. And obviously the cable, which is PVC coated. They say 7/9 copper, but yeah, okay. And then a clip for the cable, and a hard case with some hard silicone tips in there. So I see the soft silicone ones, I just put the medium ones in there as a comparison. And I reckon they are pretty good IMs as things go. So the tuning they have, I'd call it slightly U-shaped. Now, probably everyone's saying they're kind of warm of neutral. Let me explain my reasoning. So they do have a slightly boosted bass, but tastefully so, versus dead on neutral. And that means that, say, if you're listening to old music where the mastering is fairly neutral, then it fills in the bass a little bit. It sounds, there's enough without overdoing it and interfering. However, if you do get modern music where there's a lot more bass in there, then it doesn't become overwhelming and drown out the mid-range or the treble. So it works out very well. Now I'm going to jump to the treble for reasons I'll explain in a sec. They have somewhat typical balanced armature treble. So there's a little bit of glare in there, well, they're called BA treble, simply because balanced armatures do have some amount of distortion. While I think the treble tuning in my ears with, say, the stock tips, I usually use the hard silicone tips, at least with these IMs, ends up being a little bit glary, and that makes it sound brighter than it actually is. Then the mid-range is pulled back a little bit, which I found out afterwards when I was found a graph online after I'd been listening a while. But the overall result tends to be maybe a touch warm of neutral, but tastefully so, with a little bit of a glary but not bright treble. The main thing that I think the reason people are starting calling these S tier is because the coherency of these is very impressive. So it's very coherent all the way from the bass through to the treble. There's no major or no significant wonkiness that makes them sound uneven. You can have a little bit of deviation from technically neutral and still keep things coherent, as long as there aren't any weird jumps in the middle or weird oddities. The thing that really got me was I was listening to an album called Fakes by Diane and Carmien. And there are a couple of interesting DJs who combine kind of their dad's old jazz standards with some, like a DJ take on them, which I really like. And the Fakes album is actually their tracks, but remixed using a small live band to kind of rehash them. But they're not the actual tracks, but actually like acoustic versions of them almost. It's kind of cool. They're still mixed, some of them. But yeah, they've got things like they mix in Billie Holiday into one, but they've still got live instruments in there. It's kind of interesting. I really like it. It's oddball. It actually, listening to them got me into jazz in the first place. So what I noticed then is two things. First of all is that the macro detail and the ability to delineate where instruments were, like the instrument separation, was very clear. Also, the thing that struck me was that cymbals actually sounded real. You did have not just tiz, but actually you could hear how the cymbal rang and the note decayed. Not a huge amount, not like a high-end IM, but enough that was like, okay, this sounds real. That's not something I usually expect in a pair of IMs that are only $399. Now again, I suspect that, 3D printing their own shell, they could keep the price down, and also 3D printing their own shell, they could keep the accuracy of the chamber and the arrangement of the drivers to a point that they can adjust things to be absolutely perfect. And you see this a lot on usually higher end IEMs as well. The only, of course, downside is you don't have that holographic space like you get with IEMs that have electret drivers, what they're calling electrostatic, for example. And the actually bass isn't quite, I wouldn't have guessed it's actually a dynamic driver. It sounded a touch woolly, more like a balanced armature driver being used for the bass. But all the same, despite that and the tizziness of the balanced armature drivers, I'm really impressed by how these things perform. So switching to some other music, and I'm going to talk about the mid-range next, I was listening to the Black Keys, and I felt that the mid-range of the Black Keys wasn't quite right. So what I did is I switched to an old classic that I listened to, is David Chesky's Jazz and the New Harmonic. Now, it was produced in a church. It is a live performance. You can hear a ton of detail, and it reiterated how I could hear very clearly the high quality of the cymbal hits in there. The decay, again, not as much as a high-end IEM over $1,000 or even more, but still very impressive. But the piano in the mid-range didn't quite come through as I felt it should. And that's when I went and found the graph and found that the mid-range is a little bit lower than technically neutral. So that explains what's going on there. So maybe only the mid-range for me isn't quite right, but all the same, I could listen to music and enjoy it. And what is more, very fast-paced music like that Diane and Carmien or Spongel. I think I was listening to a track called Walking Backwards Through the Cosmic Mirror, since I always seem to find tracks with very oddball names. That is a very, very fast-paced track. In the middle is a flute playing, and you could hear very clearly the clattering and the valves of the flute and the detail of that. Again, $3.99, that's pretty impressive. Then what I thought is, it's time for tip rolling, which is what you saw in the beginning. I got out the good old Pentacon Corriere tips. I don't know if I can show you really clearly on the camera. They're the ones which have an aluminium insert in there. I think you can get brass insert ones as well, which I probably should get and try out. So I think they damp resonances, especially with balanced armature drivers. I remember the guys who do the Hercules Audio Moses discovered them, and it damped some of my complaints about the treble on them. Like, I saw them at one Can Jam, I tried them, I thought, yeah, the treble's not quite right. And the next Can Jam, they put these tips on them. It's like, oh, that's way better. Now I thought, put them on here because the hard silicon tips had worked out really well, and the Pentacon tips are hard silicon as well. And some of that resonance from the balanced armatures was nicely damped, and that made them probably a little bit more warm of neutral, or maybe what people are calling warm of neutral with those tips, as it kept the balanced armature kind of distortions in check nicely. Then they become really good. Now, again, they don't have much depth to the sound, but they had good, sense of width and old school high quality sound. Classic hybrid sound that you get, but very well nailed down and very accurate due to, I presume, a very carefully crafted chamber. The interesting thing, I thought that a lot, everyone would be going for electrets and tribrids and all that kind of thing, but there are still people out there even going for making IEMs which do very, very well with just balanced armatures, or really very well with some kind of basic hybrid. And especially given that doing a really good treble with just balanced armature IEMs is a challenge, that's pretty interesting. But again, it keeps price down and keeps the size down, although with a dynamic driver in there, the shells are still somewhat, large-ish. They're kind of typically large. And that nozzle's pretty wide too, so that may make them look a little bit smaller than they really are. So getting the tips on there, at least I didn't have to push them over a collar. That worked out, and because it's resin, I don't know if I can you can hear the noise running my fingernail over there. Tips tend to stay on fairly firmly. So $3.99 from Elise Audio, who's importing them from China. If you're in Europe, that's an easy one. Strong recommendation from me if you want a neutralish, slightly warm of neutral IM and don't mind rolling tips. Now, I didn't go into the cable thing. I think that's going down a rabbit hole. That is, too much. You can get either a 4.4mm Pentacon terminated cable or a 3.5mm, and it's the standard 2-pin connector, so you just find a 2-pin cable to your liking and stick them on there if you want to go down that route. But even stock, I was pretty impressed with them. And thanks, Ahmed, for giving me this pair of IMs. If you have a pair, or you get a pair, and you watch this video and go, I'm going to take Amos's recommendation and buy a pair, post in the comments how they went for you, what you use them with. They apparently have a higher than usual impedance, so they might work with a larger variety of gear, but they're still sensitive enough. I mean, I was using them on, say, an M33. I use them in the shit vestry, if you saw my review. Actually, the TT2 and M scaler, although they don't scale that high. And yeah, let me know how they go for you and what music they worked with, if there's anything they didn't work with. Let this review be useful, not just for yourself, but other people by posting some comments. And if you see me at CanJam and you say, you know there's a really interesting pair of IEMS headphones or something that I should check out, come say hi, let me know, introduce yourself. It'd be great to see you. Anyway, as always, thanks once again for watching, and I look forward to seeing you, well, at CanJam SoCal this year.